Hi everyone who's joining us for the Pie Martin's class story. We're on chapter 9 of the Mystery of the Hidden Gold. Emily Wilde is in the building. Meanwhile, Emily was stalking Mr. Tanaka. After texting Scott and Jack to alert them that the Hartleys were on the move, she sat in the guest house lounge and pretended to be absorbed in playing Bejeweled on her phone while keeping watch on the suspect, who was finishing his breakfast in the dining room. He was pouring himself a second cup of coffee when his phone rang. Ah, yes, hello. Very well. Thank you. Mr. Tanaka paused and nodded a few times. Yes, I've tracked down the document we were discussing. Emily had known it all along. Mr. Tanaka had taken the map. She squeezed Drift so tight she almost cut off the circulation to his tail. Mr. Tanaka was still talking quietly into his phone. We need to prepare for the next phase of operations. I suggest we meet this morning and arrange a visit to the location for later today. And I'd like to keep this under wraps for now. Emily ground her teeth. A visit to the location? He was planning to go to Gull Island and dig up the gold today. Yes, I'll be there at 11 o'clock, Mr. Tanaka said. So will I, Emily thought. Mr. Tanaka picked up his shiny black briefcase and headed out of the dining room. Emily glanced up as if she'd only just noticed he was there. He smiled and brushed an imaginary speck of dust off from his shoulders of his crisp white shirt. Good morning, Emily. Are your parents around? I'd like to order a taxi. Emily couldn't help admiring his nerve. How could he speak to her so normally when he'd stolen her map? It was probably in his briefcase right now. She noticed he never let that out of his sight. But two can play at that game, she thought. I can do that for you, Mr. Tanaka, she said in her politest voice. Walking across to the antique table they used as a reception desk. If you just let me know the address, I'll phone the taxi company for you. Mr. Tanaka smiled. Certainly. It's in a company called West and Mitchell. They're on Penrose Business Park in Carrickstowe. Can you ask the taxi to come at 10:30, please? Emily nodded and made the call. At 10:15, the taxi driver rang through to the lighthouse reception to confirm that he was waiting to pick up Mr. Tanaka at the end of the harbour road, which was the nearest cars could get to the lighthouse, as there was only a narrow footpath along the promontory itself. Your taxi's here, Emily called. Mr. Tanaka was sitting with his briefcase on his lap, reading the Financial Times. He glanced at his elegant Rolex watch. It's a bit early, but never mind. There's never any harm in being punctual, is there? Which is exactly what Emily had been hoping he'd say when she'd ordered the taxi for 10:15. He gave her an extra 15 minutes to cycle into Carrickstowe and find Wester Mitchell's office before Mr. Tanaka's meeting started. She should just be able to make it by 11 o'clock. She was going to catch Mr. Tanaka red-handed. All she had to do was blag her way into the office building, find a hiding place with a good view of the meeting, and capture Mr. Tanaka and his accomplices on camera, poring over the map. She borrowed Dad's video camera for this purpose. She then had to get the map back, and of course, but she had to worry about that part later. Come on, Drift, she said. We've got work to do. It was almost 11 by the time Emily found the office building, an impressive multi-story block of sandstone and smoked glass. She leaned her bike against the wall. Drift hopped down from his special custom-built basket on the back and followed her through the revolving doors. They found themselves in a vast lobby gleaming with white marble surfaces. Emily didn't know what Wester Mitchell did, but she was pretty sure that this wasn't a fudge factory Mr. Tanaka had claimed he was in Cornwall to visit. Can I help you, miss? A man in a security guard's uniform called out from behind a shiny counter. He looked Emily up and down. She was glad she tied her unruly hair up into a plait and switched her usual T-shirt and frayed denim shorts for a dress she had been forced to wear to Aunt Beryl's party. Yes, please. Emily approached the counter. There's a man called Mr. Tanaka here for a meeting. He's staying as a guest at my parents' hotel. Emily thought hotel sounded swankier than bed and breakfast. And he left his credit card on the breakfast table, so I've come to return it to him. Emily held up an envelope containing a small flat object, the size and shape of a credit card, but which wouldn't be much use on a shopping spree, since it was in fact Emily's library card. If you tell me which room he's in, I'll run up and give it back. She glanced at the back of the lifts at the back of the foyer. The security guard rubbed his hand over his shaved head. Can't let anyone in the building without a prior appointment. But I'll only be a minute, Emily yielded. Rules are rules. You leave that card with me, and I'll see he gets it. Oh, it's okay, Emily mumbled. I suppose I can give it back to him tonight. Yes, I suppose you can. Now, stop wasting my time. Suddenly the guard noticed Drift sitting at Emily's side. Get that dog out of here, and don't tell me he's a guide dog. I wasn't born yesterday. And with that, he swept Emily out through the revolving doors and onto the street. Emily glared at her reflection in the mirrored window. She was shimmering with outrage. Mr. Tanaka and his shady sidekicks were somewhere inside that building, rubbing their hands in glee, plotting to shoot off to Gull Island, no doubt in some fancy company speedboat to steal her gold. Well, she wasn't going to stand for it. A white van with Jenkins Janitorial Supplies stenciled on the side buzzed past and disappeared round the side of the building. Janitorial supplies, that meant toilet paper and stuff, didn't it? Maybe there was another way in. Emily called Drift and sprinted round to the back of the building. The van had pulled up in the parking bay outside, a set of double doors marked deliveries. The driver got out and pulled open the back doors of the van. Whistling the James Bond theme tune, he folded down a ramp, wheeled out a large trolley of supplies and headed into the building. Yes, this is it, Emily whispered to Drift. But then she noticed something. There was a CCTV camera on the wall, pointing directly at the double doors. If she tried to sneak in, the security guard would be after her in a flash. She glanced back at the van. Mr. Jenkins' janitorial had left the doors open, and there was another trolley inside. She checked the angle of the camera. There was no way he could see the van. She had an idea. Admittedly, it was a crazy idea, the kind Jack would come up with, but time was running out. She had to do something. Emily sprinted to the van. The trolley was basically a cardboard on wheels. The trolley was basically a cupboard on wheels with sliding doors to hide the contents. Heart pounding, she hauled out 3 boxes of toilet cleaner and a vat of liquid soap and hid them under a coat in the corner of the van. Then she climbed inside the trolley, bundled Drift in with her, and slid the doors shut. Moments later, the trolley jolted into life. Emily held on tight to Drift and closed her eyes. They were thrown to one side as the trolleys tipped down the ramp. Then there was a long stretch of trundling and juddering and veering around corners. Eventually they rattled to a halt. Emily strained her ears and heard doors opening and closing. She knew she had to get out fast before Mr. Jenkins' janitorial reached into the trolley for his toilet ducks and found a girl and a dog instead. Like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Although she suspected Mr. Jenkins wouldn't find it terribly magical. She hadn't really thought through the whole getting out of the trolley without being seen part, she realised, but it was too late now. Slowly she slid the door open a crack. The smell of the disinfectant hung in the air, but all was quiet. She opened it a little further and saw white tiles and a row of wash basins. She was in the toilets. A door opened and there was a click-clack of high heels. Emily breathed the biggest sigh of relief she'd ever breathed in her entire life. She was in the ladies' toilets. She opened the doors wide, grabbed Drift by the collar and bolted inside a cubicle just as Mr. Jenkins' janitorial came back into the room. "I don't believe it," he shouted, rattling the trolley out into the corridor. "My bloomin' toilet cleaner have walked. People will nick anything these days. We did it, Emily whispered into Drift's ear. It may not have been the most dignified entrance, she thought, but Emily Wilde is in the building. When the coast was clear, Emily and Drift sneaked out of the toilets and roamed the maze of corridors. Luckily, most of the office doors had windows in them, and she was able to peep in. She saw computers and photocopiers and flip charts and people sitting around big tables with bottles of water and laptops in front of them. She was starting to think she'd never find Mr. Tanaka when she finally spotted him. He was deep in conversation with two other men and women, all dressed in suits, pointing at the map on the table. Her heart in her mouth. Emily was reaching into her bag for the camera when Drift's ears suddenly flicked up. She froze. A voice was speaking into a walkie-talkie somewhere nearby. Yes, I've had reports of an intruder. An unauthorised girl with a dog. I'm going to leave it there. Join us for Chapter 10, The Toss of a Coin. Take care.